Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. Back today to do the Spring is in the Air book tag. This was created by Daniela over at Uncommon Reader and Rainey from Beyond Books. And this is a book tag which is just celebrating all things spring, looking forward to the warmer months, and has various questions which tie books in together with the kind of things that we'd expect from spring. So without much further ado, let's just get straight into these prompts. Prompt number 1 is Spring Chicks. Name a book that made you feel warm and fuzzy. I think the book most recently that has made me feel all warm and fuzzy is First Time Caller by BK Borison. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in my April reading wrap up, but this is a lovely little romance which is inspired by Sleepless in Seattle. I do believe the other books in this series are going to be riffing on other Nora Ephron films, the next one being When Harry Met Sally, and I'm very excited about that. But in this particular one, we've got our main character who is a radio host who has been hosting a show that is all about romance and relationships, but he has been feeling out of love with love and very cynical. This is until he gets a phone call from a young girl who is calling on behalf of her mother. Her mother hasn't been dating for many years and her daughter just feels like she's in a bit of a funk, and could the host possibly give her any relationship advice? The mother, when she discovers what her daughter is doing, is very embarrassed but agrees to take part in a new spin-off show which is looking to get her on some dates and potentially finding her perfect man, all despite the fact that it is very clear from the outset that sparks are flying between her and the host. And this was just so delightful and lovely and warm and fuzzy. I really love all of the side characters in here who really bring to life this family dynamic. I love how open and communicative our leads are, and you get a sense from their very first interaction that there is a real spark, and it was just a really lovely little romance. Question number 2 is April Showers, a book that is set near, in or on the water, or that has water in the title. So I recently read Under Loch and Key by Lana Ferguson, and it's taking everything in me not to mention that, because you know I will take any opportunity to talk about the Loch Ness Monster romance. But an alternative to that would probably be Wave Walker by Suzanne Hayward. I've not talked very much about this one. It's one that I read back in 2023 as part of my In Real Life book club. But this is a memoir which tells the real story of when Suzanne was younger. When she was 10, her parents came to her and said that they were going to be quitting their jobs, giving up all of their belongings, and the family was going to be living on a boat, embarking on a sailing adventure around the world to honour Captain Cook's third voyage. As I say, what was originally meant to be a 3-year journey ended up taking 10 years and found the teenage Suzanne just feeling stifled, neglected, and often in dangerous circumstances as a result of the obsessive nature of her father. And this book is all about her fight to be heard and to receive an education, and the limited means with which she had to do so. Prompt number 3 is Spring Break. Talk about a time you took a break from reading and why. Now, I've definitely taken breaks from reading, but I don't think really any of those were ever intentional. I feel like any time that there has been a lull in my reading, I've really not wanted it. I have been trying my very best to read, and something has just gotten in the way. My longest reading break was around about 4 years, and that wasn't 4 years of not reading at all, but definitely 4 years where I was reading nowhere near the amount that I would like to have been. And that was between the ages of 14 and 18, so peak time for GCSEs and A-level, which is really the reason that I wasn't reading very much, or at least not reading very much for fun. I am just naturally not a very organised person, and I found the pressure of exams, of school, of the different extracurriculars I was doing to be just a little bit too much for me, that scheduling time for reading for fun just seemed impossible. I didn't understand how other people were able to do it, but all the time I would be picking up books and trying to read and I just couldn't concentrate, or I felt guilty. So it wasn't ever a true reading break, but I just certainly felt very guilty about the fact that I wasn't reading. Prompt number 4 is Swallow's Homecoming, a book or an author you always go back to for comfort. There are definitely various authors and various books that I turn to for comfort. More now recently it is through audiobooks, because I'm living somewhere where I can't just keep all of my physical books. And one of the ones I go to a lot is Tessa Dare. I've only really read about 5 or 6 Tessa Dare books, and I know I have plenty more to explore, but I particularly will always go back to When a Scot Ties the Knot and The Duchess Deal if I'm just wanting a little bit of comfort, something that is really fun and sweet. You know, I'm a romance girl at heart. I love the banter that Tessa Dare always writes between her leads. I love that they always have historical settings but very feminist principles. They're just always good fun, and so definitely the perfect comfort reads. Prompt 5 is Blooms, a book that started slowly but blossomed to be one of your favourite reads. Honestly, I would say at least half of my favourite reads are books that I read for the first time, wasn't really sure that I liked them, but then something about the book just pulled me back in and I would reread them and then end up loving them. It's like there's something in my brain that just puts up resistance. It can sense that there is about to be a big shift, a big seismic shift in my reading life. This book is about to change my life and my brain wants nothing to do with it. I've actually done a whole video about books that became favourites on a reread, which I will link down below. But books that fit that mould are Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Each of them, the first time I read them, I was like, I'm not sure that I know what the hype is about these books. But then the second time I went around to read them, I just fell in love. Prompt 6 is Eggs in a Basket, 3 books you want to read this spring. And I think the easiest way to do this is just to pick 3 books from my physical TBR. So the one that I am currently reading is historical fiction, and it is The Pretender by Jo Harkin. This is recently released historical fiction about Lambert Simnel, who was a pretender to Henry VII's throne. I am getting up to around about halfway through, just a little under, and it's definitely interesting so far. I also have The Bookshop, the Draper, the Candlestick Maker by Annie Gray, which is a history of the high street. Definitely a slightly lighter turn. I started reading this last year as a library book. I ended up having to give it back, and I have jumped back into it and really enjoying this so far. And then a recent addition to my TBR is The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. This one's a funny one because I've heard kind of mixed things on BookTube, but the concept of this is just too good for me to not at least give it a go. This world where there is kind of this bridge between historical periods and our modern day, that we're able to take people from the past, from just before they're about to die, bring them to our modern day, resuscitate them, get them healthy again, and then they are just living in our world. I don't know what the purpose is of this. I've never delved really far into any of the reviews, but that just seems like a really interesting concept. And as somebody who is a big history fan, I'm often thinking, you know, what would it be like if somebody from a previous century were dragged into our modern day? What would they think? What would they do? And this kind of seems like it's giving me that. I'm very intrigued by the implications. Prompt number 7 is Green Pastures, a classic that never gets old. I mean, the classic for me is Pride and Prejudice. Jane Austen just generally never gets old. There is always something new that I read from her. There's always like a little interaction each time that I read that I'd never noticed before. It's always 5 stars. It will always be 5 stars. I don't think there is anything that anybody can say about Pride and Prejudice that is ever going to make me hate it. Conversely, prompt number 8 is Pollen, a book or an author you're allergic to. And as somebody who does suffer quite a bit from hay fever, I know the feeling in life and I know the feeling with authors. Recently for me, it has become clear that Susanna Clarke is my Pollen author, or at least one of them. A couple of years ago, I tried to read Piranesi and I really couldn't get into it and I ended up DNFing it. And then recently I have DNF'd Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And I finished, though kind of begrudgingly, The Wood at Midwinter. It was the first book that I read in 2025 and, you know, it kind of made my reading gears start with a bit of a bleh. I just can't get into her writing. I don't know what it is. I know so many people love her, but it just never does anything for me. I find it really detached. I can never get into the characters, and that's a really important thing for me. Even if she is able to evoke an atmosphere, that's just really low on my list of priorities. And then finally, we have the bonus question, which is Equinox. Find 2 books on your shelf that have the exact same number of pages and talk briefly about them. So because I don't have all of my books with me, I was kind of limited on what I could do. So instead I went to Goodreads. I filtered everything by page count. So even though this might not be completely accurate, that is what I've based it on. And the 2 books that I thought I would talk about are North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, as well as Elizabeth of York, The Last White Rose by Alison Weir. Obviously, North and South is a classic. It's often touted as the Victorian industrial Pride and Prejudice, which I can definitely see why. The clashing between the industrial Mr. Thornton and the genteel southern Margaret Hale, who slowly through the course of the book start to put aside their differences, learn more about the other's life experiences, and start to fall in love. That is a very, very simplified version of North and South, but I don't want to give too much away. It is just a really great book. Maybe this book appeals to me because I am a northerner who moved down south, and in my heart I will always be Team North. Who knows? But I just think it's great. Then Elizabeth of York, The Last White Rose is the first book in Alison Weir's Tudor Roses series. It starts with Elizabeth of York, it goes then to Henry VIII, her son, and then goes to his daughter, Mary I. But this is the one that started that little series, and I just think Elizabeth of York is quite an underrated historical figure. I think because there's just not a lot to go on in the sources. She often seems like quite quiet in the historical record, but she was the daughter of Edward IV and Elizabeth of Woodville, the sister of the Princess in the Tower, the wife of Henry VII, as I say, mother of Prince Arthur, and his younger brother who would go on to be Henry VIII. She lived through so much amazing history, and I really enjoy how Alison Weir was able to bring her to life. Between this and Jane Seymour, those are probably 2 of my favourite Alison Weir historical fictions, and I think she just really has a skill at being able to bring out quiet characters and give them a rich internal world and make them feel a lot more active than necessarily they appear to us in the historical record. So there we go, those are all of my answers to the Spring is in the Air book tag. Please let me know your answers to any of these questions, and if you've read any of the books that I've spoken about today, I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.